Welcome to the Startup Grind.
Everybody stand up. Let's cheer him up. Naval Ravikant.
I got the high chair. Is that working? Yeah.
That's actually a tradition that came from you because the last time you, I don't know if you remember
Short.
this, no, the last time you came, I said that welcome Naval like Rocky, and I don't know what was in the crowd that night, but we had to kick a few people out. So let me introduce Naval. Naval has been a founder of companies like Vast, ePinions, and now AngelList. He's been an angel investor in more companies than I can name, but most notably Foursquare and Twitter. He is AngelList currently has had 25,000 startups create profiles and create company pages on the site. They have over 3,200 investors, which we're going to talk about, who are investing and looking at startups and following startups on the site. And yeah, AngelList has really become this really amazing thing. So we're gonna. How many people are familiar with AngelList? We got, okay, most people. Okay.
Otherwise, what are you doing?
Yeah. I did put out something about stock tips, so if you talk to us a little bit about you've said recently that you can pretty much determine within 5 minutes if you're going to invest in somebody or not, and there's criteria for that. Not that you just make a judgment call, but you have this kind of series of things that you ask and things that you've kind of seen, trends that you've seen over years of investing, and I thought maybe we could go through some of those. So
Yeah, so it's, at some level it's just pattern matching, and some level it's just gut feel. And every investor is different. They all have their own criteria. So take mine with a grain of salt, right? It's all personal, and I've had lots and lots of misses and failures too. But generally, I think of it in 4 parts. There's sort of the team, the product, the traction, and the social proof. And the most important, at the end of the day, in fact, I think I tweeted this today, it's like product's all that matters, everything else is bullshit. Because at the end of the day, all that matters is your product, and that's going to survive and do well in the marketplace or not, and everything else is a proxy towards that. But at the stage at which most investors invest in Silicon Valley seed stage Series A companies, they're really betting on the team because they know the product will evolve, the market will evolve, things will change. So in 5 minutes, you try and very quickly size up the team and say, are these people smart? And I mean really smart. Do they know their stuff, and do they know what they don't know? And seem like someone you can work with. You look at the product and you say, is there something interesting here? Is it going after something big? Is it innovative? Or is it derivative or very niche? Traction is great. Nothing speaks like traction because that's the customers themselves voting. But very often you don't have evidence of that because it's too early. But if you see that, that's a clear indicator. And then there are a few ways in which entrepreneurs can fool you on traction. So good investors have countermeasures. There's like a little arms race there. They say downloads. Okay, well, how many installs do you still have? Installs. Okay, how many users do you have? Okay, users. Okay, how many of those are new versus returning? Returning users. Okay, how are they returning? There's a little arms race that goes on. And then finally, is social proof. And social proof is just a monkey see, monkey do thing, which is what other people, good people, have voted by becoming involved with a company. And it's actually, a lot of people don't like social proof. They're like, well, it should be based on who you know. It's actually not based on who you know, because it's based on what these people are committing to you. So for example, if an investor is investing in you, that's good social proof. If an investor is advising you, that's negative social proof. Why is the investor investing, right? Same way, if an advisor is advising you, that's good social proof. But if an advisor is just sort of referring you but not advising, that's negative social proof. So you kind of have to factor all these things, and it's like a little pattern matching algorithm you run. And then with AngelList, because we've reviewed so many profiles, I mean, we'll get, I think in the last 24 hours alone, we got like 80 profiles created, right? Oh. And so we'll review a lot of those. We actually now have a little internal SLA where we try and review every single one within 24 hours, which is brutal. You just get really good at it, like that, literally. And they're running right.
And are you in that process? Are you sending them back to the entrepreneurs? Or are you just declining them altogether? Some of them, or are you?
Yeah. So we're trying to build AngelList as a standalone, live by itself thing. We're not trying to be like there's a little Yoda in the middle and all deal flow goes to Yoda. becoming sort of a mix of a Crunchbase slash LinkedIn slash self-service platform, but there are a few startups which we curate that we pick out and we say, wow, this one looks really great, and we send out to investors. But to give you an example, like if 80 startups came in today, 60 or 70 of them, they're really not fundable, okay? This is like, it could be anything from a coffee shop in Utah to someone's idea in New York that they threw up to some guy who might actually have a real business, but he's in Istanbul, so there are no investors there and so on. So you can weed out a lot of them very quickly, and then you get down to like 10 or 15 that'll like, you're not sure.
Have a chance.
Yeah, have a chance. And so sometimes you can test them against small populations of investors, which we do. We actually run very metrics-based. And you can graduate some of those out. And then there are one or two which are sort of no-brainers. You're like, wow, these are great companies that are ready to go. And those end up oversubscribed.
Wow. And so when you do that, so you've got those 10 or 15, you send those out to small pockets of expert investors in those whatever fields they're going in.
Yeah.
And then what happens next? They reach out specifically to entrepreneurs, or?
Yeah, we track the statistics, the follow rates, the intro rates. We get feedback from the investors, and then based on those, we'll distribute them further and further.
Okay. In the top one or two, what do you do with them? Do you bring them into your office? Do you guys meet with them?
We don't meet with them. We don't want any more information than the investors are going to see, and it would never scale. So we're not in that business. We basically just send it to the investors. The investors like it. They can follow it for more updates, and they can take an introduction right there and get a meeting with the company.
But you're still investing in companies, right? I mean, you
almost never. I mean, I
is that right?
Yeah, I do maybe one a quarter now.
Really?
We're seed stage investors.
Man, I had some bad luck. Yeah, because it seems like, so you had 3 companies in the last 3 weeks that got acquired, right? But is it a matter of, okay, I've got this portfolio. Is it just because you're doing other things, or is it because it became too much to manage? What is the reason for that?
The reason why I cut back on investing just because I'm too busy with AngelList. It also creates a bit of a weird conflict of interest.
Sure.
So there's also that issue. So I had a fund before, a seed fund I was investing out of, and that's mostly wound down. So it's just on its dregs, and I'm kind of finishing it out. But I'm not planning on raising another one.
Okay. And then your role within AngelList is, so if you're not investing in the companies, where does other than this great feeling that you get as founders get funding and get yelled at by their investors, what is in it for you? I mean, what's in it for you guys?
So I mean, I think we're doing something really big. It's valuable for the industry. It's obviously a value for us if we ever want to get back into investing. It would make things a lot easier. But mainly, I think there's just a need for it, and so it needs to exist. I think of it very much like Craigslist. It is named after that. And so over time we may monetize it, but it'll never be in the obvious way. It's not going to be like by taking a cut. I mean, that'll never work. First of all, I go to jail, right? Yes, all kinds of issues around broker-dealer regulations, so that wouldn't work. But there are ancillary businesses we could build around it. Like, for example, we've launched a recruiting platform. We've got 20,000 startups that never raise money on AngelList. Those people are probably quite eligible bachelors, in the sense of developers and designers and so on for jobs in the companies that did get funded. We may be introducing companies in the future to their accountants, to their lawyers, to their real estate agents. Really what we've got is a network, and the nexus of which is these company profiles. So actually I would say half the companies that get funded on AngelList today, we don't actually distribute. What happens is, like, some investor will be browsing and find it. Someone who's connected with a company will share with their followers. So there are many other ways for the company to get noticed. It's sort of like LinkedIn, right? LinkedIn is a giant pile of resumes, but not everybody gets recruited from LinkedIn, but it still has huge value.
And what in terms of the entrepreneurs, these cycles that you see, do you see like a lot of entrepreneurs are like, oh, geez, here's Jason again. We're submitting a 6th company.
Right.
Do you see these guys like, hey, they're here for 6 months, they're gone, you never hear from them again? I mean, what is the average, cycle of a company that gets submitted on the site?
It is literally all over the place. I mean, we have companies that come in and they work on their company for 12 months and keep updating their profile, and then they hit some inflection point and great things happen. There are companies that come in and right away within a week they're flipped and oversubscribed. And there are a lot of entrepreneurs where you see they come in with a company and then you look and see, oh, they have 3 other companies simultaneously on the site. So they're sort of trying things out. It's almost like they're A/B testing the investors. It's everywhere. You get a data set that large, you can find any pattern you're looking for.
This is just ripping off that. I saw this entrepreneur not too long ago who he was like messaging every investor you'd ever heard of ever. Like, I mean, he was in New York and he was just like replying to all these investors, and you could see like his startup message would like evolve. So like for 3 days he'd tweet this, and then for like the next 3 days it was like, it's Craigslist for taxis, and then it's like it's Airbnb for for beds, and it's like what? Like where is he going? But it like this evolution. It seems like, at least from what I see, good entrepreneurs, their ideas, their thoughts, if they haven't hit on the first shot, they're evolving over time.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, that's why I think long term where we're headed with AngelList is it is a place where you will throw up startup profile as soon as you think of the idea. And then you'll evolve it, you'll add people to it, you'll add investors, you'll add product, you'll add screenshots, you'll add demos, you'll add customer traction, keep people up to date. And this whole idea that sort of you go out, you raise a round, then you stop, then 18 months later you go, you raise another round, then you stop. That's a broken, stupid process, right? The way it's going to work way down the line, and Angel is a 10-year project, but the way it'll work is that you'll be continuously updating your analytics, your stats, your people, your team, and new investors will always be coming in and saying, okay, now I'll bid a little bit more for your stock, or sorry, not interested. There'll be more of a liquid dynamic market feeling for the whole thing. But that's a long-term thing. That's not just us. The entire industry has to evolve that way.
So we want to test this experiment on stage here. We have a startup who, I'm going to time it. You got 5 minutes. Then you don't have to like make a call at the end. I would invest or not. But just to kind of, I think it'd be interesting for people to see your thought process, see kind of how you evaluate things. So we've got the jellyfish art guys who are here sitting on the. Has anybody heard of jellyfish art? Okay. It's another one you're going to hear
to make
about.
it fair, 5 minutes. Can I do a Q&A format? Because they could spend 5 minutes talking about exactly the wrong thing, right? So I need to get certain data.
No, you drive it. You drive the whole thing. You drive the whole thing. So we're gonna bring these guys up. Let's give them a round of applause. They're not nervous. I think you guys are gonna share this mic. So.
All right, cool. So yeah, assume we've gone through the pleasantries. Just tell me a little bit about you guys.
Okay, so my name's Alex. This is Cam. We're Jellyfish Art. We sell pet jellyfish. So we launched our desktop jellyfish tank, our flagship product, on Kickstarter in August. Sold 160 grand in pre-orders as one of their top 10 campaigns. We just got our first batch of inventory in from China last week, and we've already got an offer that would have sold out 5 times that, a week later from a retailer. So our main problem is obviously inventory.
What is this, a tech play or what's the technology thing?
So we're not a traditional tech company. I mean, we're in e-commerce mainly. We are starting to sell through retailers, but it's not sort of a bleeding edge technology. It's just a consumer product.
And what are you going to do after jellyfish, or is it just jellyfish all the way?
So what we found to work really well is sort of these exotic turnkey pet kits. So we're going to branch out into similar products. So like a seahorse tank, jellyfish tank, carnivorous plants, whatever people want, and sell them as these packages online where people open the box and it has everything they need to get going. And we'll just move to similar products from there.
Cool. Now, I'm cheating a little bit, but I think I know you guys are a YC company, right? Because I've been emailed about you before. Can you say that or not? Or
We can't say that.
You can't say that. All right. So what's the funding like? What are you raising? Who's involved? Who's with the company?
So we bootstrapped it. We were able to get off the ground with this pre-order from Kickstarter. So financing right now is we're looking for it.
Anyone committed to the round?
No, I mean we're not sort of formally fundraising out, sort of,
Right.
or I can't say.
Yeah. So I would say this is an example of a really interesting company that obviously has a passionate set of customers out there waiting for the product. And it's actually straightforward in the sense you know how to execute. Not straightforward in the sense I'm sure handling tanks of jellyfish across the country or the world is a really difficult thing, but it's at the same time the issue I'm sure you run into over and over when talking to anyone kind of in the classic Silicon Valley scene, which is the market size and is it really a classic tech play, right? So
Exactly.
So the thing you're going to run into is, are you better off doing this business as not a lifestyle business, but rather one that is organically grown out of revenues. And so that way, if it's making a couple $100,000, a couple of $1 million a year, you can put that in your pocket. If you dominate the world jellyfish market, the problem is it's still not going to be like a $10 billion company. And the way the entire Silicon Valley system is set up is everyone chases the $1 billion companies. And there are actually lots of good reasons for that. It's a combination of the IPO markets, the way exits and M&A works, capital gains taxes. I mean, you can run down the whole chain, but the entire game is rigged in that sense. And even an angel investor will hesitate to invest in something like this because they're afraid that the big VC investor in the next round won't see the billion-dollar company, so their money will be so-called trapped. So what you could do is you could raise money from a certain class of individual angel who is happy being paid out in dividends if the company just goes to a certain point. And you might be better off doing that because otherwise, if the company gets to the point where it's $5 million a year in revenue, making you decent profit, but can't go beyond that, if you're a classic C Corp with a traditional investor, they're going to force you to exit the company, sell it or shut it down. They're going to almost push you off a cliff in that process. Whereas an angel investor who is investing their own money, not a fund's money, could actually take dividends alongside with you and would encourage you as well then to take dividends, and you could all make a lot of money doing it. So this is a very unusual class of company in that it is a legit company, it's a good company, you've got demand, you've obviously got product, you're smart guys from, I know a little bit background check on you already. Actually, I didn't know you were going to be here tonight, but you know, angels do a lot of stuff. We hear a lot of stuff because we're sort of at the center. But at the same time, I'm not convinced this is a venture financeable company, and I'm not sure you should even try. I think if you do, it is a trap. All you're doing is you're trapping yourself into a path which may not be the right path for you.
Yeah,
1 minute, guys.
we're right in your wheelhouse. I mean, we've had this conversation, and we're pretty much in agreement with you that that's the sort of investor that we're looking for. And you know, that's not the classic investor in Silicon Valley, as you've said. So we're just sort of hoping we can find someone who.
Yeah, you're also going to need a very unusual pitch because most pitches are all about, here's why my product is the best product and we're going to own the world. Your pitch actually has to be a financial pitch, which most of Silicon Valley looks down on. But you kind of have to say, this is the cost of acquiring a customer for a jellyfish tank on Google AdWords, and you know, this is the revenue we can make from them, here's a profit, and da-da-da, and here's how big we can scale this business, and this is the year when we start paying dividends and returns to you guys, and roughly here's what they'll look like.
Right, yeah, and we're selling direct to customers online pretty significantly just through our website, so we have very hard numbers. We know exactly how much a tank costs, how much we can sell for, et cetera. So we have those numbers, and yeah, we would want an investor who understands and appreciates those numbers as well.
They exist. Most of them are outside of Silicon Valley, actually.
Yeah.
Let's give these guys a big round of applause. So, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I was very honest with what I thought. One thing I've learned over the years is that you never want to be passive aggressive as an investor in a pitch, because when you figure it out, like a lot of investors can't say no. They don't know how to say no, and so they aren't honest. And so they say, yeah, well, that's really interesting. Okay, you know, let me make a few phone calls. Why don't you send me a deck? And
But they can't say no because
they're embarrassed. This is hard, right? It's hard to tell somebody like no.
But they don't want to burn somebody, right? That could come back and then Pinterest.
That's the other thing, right? It's the next Pinterest, and then you're suddenly feel like an idiot, right?
Yeah.
And especially if you're in a VC or a seed fund partnership, then at least you can tell your partners like, hey, weren't you looking at a deal? You'd be like, oh yeah, I traded it away. It got really hot. I chased it away. Got it away. You don't say like, oh, I passed, right? Because that's admitting that you screwed up. So, most investors.
Do VC screw up?
The way the business
Hourly
works is
basis?
you screw up all the time,
Yeah.
and it's just you just have to get it right once in a while. I'm gonna tell you my big screw up story. I was the first guy to see Uber. I passed on that. I got in a little bit later when they raised a little bit of money through AngelList. I snuck a tiny piece in, but I could have done the whole thing.
Yeah.
I passed on Pinterest.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah, so Ben Silverman came to AngelList early on.
Yeah.
He was very meticulous. He only
What year would that have been?
This was 2010, end of 2010. He only wanted to meet 6 people. We argued with him. Finally, we sent out 6 emails for him.
Specific people?
Yeah, specific people he targeted. I think he met Max Levchin through
Okay.
AngelList who invested. Although I don't remember if that's. I know we sent out an email. I know Max invested. I'm not sure if we were the sole trigger.
Yeah.
There might have been multiple triggers. And then Ben came to me and he pitched it to me, and I was like, really? Images? Pinning? What? I'm really busy right now with AngelList. You know, and I passed. Frankly, I passed, and you know, I'll be very honest about it, because in fact, even knowing everything I know now, other than the fact that Pinterest was successful, but if we just say take your mental
Still wouldn't have done
learning,
it.
I still wouldn't do it.
Yeah.
I don't
Well,
get
the
it.
two guys are not technical founders, right? It's kind of a non-traditional.
Right.
Ben's an ex-Google guy, but they're not this kind of typical Silicon Valley. Hey, this is going to the moon. You know, like Brett Taylor and the Friend Feed guys. These guys were And they didn't have it right from the beginning either, right? I don't know what idea they pitched to you,
no,
but they've had
they
lots of
had
ideas.
they had the right idea, but they didn't have the crazy growth at the time. They had some growth for sure, but you know, you don't have to get them all right. You just have to get one or two right. I think entrepreneurs do themselves a disservice when they fixate on a specific investor. No investor is going to make your company. An investor can break your company for sure, but no investor is going to make your company. So if a certain investor doesn't get what you're doing, don't take it personally. It's like if you go on Match.com and you know you see that girl who's like really attractive, like, wow, I want that one, and you message her and she doesn't write back. What do? You stalk her on Match.com?
Exactly.
Like, oh my God, I can't believe she's not
To her
writing.
house.
Right? No, you just kind of move on, right? There's plenty of them, so it's the same thing.
That's how I got married, Naval.
Oh.
You just described my. That's embarrassing. Let's talk about if you rolled into Silicon Valley, if you packed up your whatever car you have, packed up your Taurus or something, and you rolled in. You don't drive Taurus.
Prius, yeah.
Do you drive? Sorry, Prius. It's something with an S.
I don't drive either. Right?
What do you drive?
No comment.
You're rolling your Ferrari.
He can't say.
335 BMW.
Okay.
It's parked down the street. I haven't washed it in like a month. It's low on gas, so that's happening.
You roll into Silicon Valley. You've either got an idea or you want to do a startup. You've been doing something, you have a little bit of traction. What are the first things you would do? Like, what would be the first things you would figure out? You wouldn't move on until you had nailed this issue or these couple of issues. What would that be?
If you have a startup, you're doing a startup.
You're doing something.
It's not like you walk in, you're trying to figure out what I do in Silicon Valley.
Right.
But you actually
You've got
have
something.
You have
Yeah.
the startup down. You know, it's tough because every startup needs different things. The most important is a team, the core team, the DNA, who you're working with. You basically want at least one or two other total superstars working with you. And if you don't have that, then you sort of need to back up and start over. You need to go join some company where you can get an incredible alumni network, where you can work alongside truly great people. You know, if I look at my career, you know, started 7 companies, worked in a bunch, and funded tons. How many have like super amazing people that I also happen to click with, that I trust, that I would work with again? 10, 15? You know, it's not a large set, so it's very hard to collect these truly great people. So once you've got sort of your co-founders, these people you're willing to marry for the next 5, 6 years, and you feel that they're really good, and try and get some objective outside data on that. Don't just believe your own hype. But you definitely want to feel like the least eligible, stupidest person in the room. If you don't, then it's sort of the wrong group. If you've got the team, then on the product side, you know, a great team should be able to execute on the product. So I'm less worried about that. Then just make sure you pick a big enough problem. And I think one error a lot of people make is they're trying to pick a unique problem as opposed to a big problem. So they're like, oh, I don't want to do that because it's been done before. Everything's been done before. Stripe's been done before, right? Even Pinterest with the whole image curation was done before. Bookmarking was done before. It's all been done before. Don't worry about that. But unless the absolute vision for what you have is totally dominated, don't be afraid to go after a big space. It is just as hard to build $1 billion company as it is to build $1 million company. There's almost no difference in the difficulty level. There really isn't. Because as a single human, it's not like you are, like when you see a multi-billion-dollar company, it's not like Steve Jobs went and laid every brick and built every building and manufactured every iPhone, right? So at some point he had to work through other people. And for most people, that's like 10, 15, 20 other people. So if you're going to be working through 10, 15, 20 other people, you might as well go after a market where then those 20 people can each work through 20 people, can work through 20 people, and you can build a gigantic company. So I'm a big fan of going for really, really, really big things. Every time I've gone for anything small in my life, I've sort of regretted it, and it's been a complete waste of time.
What if you started a company and you're in the company and you realize these guys you got are not smarter than you? In fact, they're not even close, and you're not that smart to begin with. So, what do you do at that point?
Wind it down.
Okay, honestly?
Yeah, wind it down, and go find the smartest bunch of people that will take you.
Okay. And how important is it to you as an investor or somebody that's built these companies? Like, Joe Schmo startup is not going to be able to, the startup founder is not going to be able to, you know, pull these guys from Google or pull these guys from Facebook. And they can try, and we do try, but you know, unless you know those guys or have this inside track with them, you're not going to get them. So as you're reviewing companies, you know, when you see, hey, Google engineer that worked on Google Maps versus, wow, this is the engineer that built this really killer product that you're looking at.
Right.
How much does that
So,
impact
so
your
I
decision?
worked with a team that went on to build Google Earth and Google Maps. It was a company called Intrinsic Graphics, which became Keyhole Systems and got bought by Google.
I think we were fighting for them.
Right. So I know that team well. And before that, they were not branded. They were from Silicon Graphics at best, or people from 3D graphics cards companies, or from video game companies that you never heard of. So I don't think the test is can you pull people from Google or Facebook. People at Google are too busy drinking their soy lattes and they're not. They're no longer in startup mode. If they are, then they joined recently and they're not planning on hanging around for a long time. So that's not the test. I think the test is, can you pull really young, energetic, enthusiastic, smart, bright people? You do not assess smart people purely by their credentials, because then you end up with a Harvard PhD who spent 7 years getting 3 degrees, but can't necessarily execute. So I don't think that's.
But you look at the let's say Y Combinator for instance. If you look at overall the pedigree of their founders, the majority of those people come from Ivy League schools. So
yeah, that's right, because the schools run the same filter right before you. So you definitely, it helps to have a filter, but if someone runs through too many filters, that means at that point, really what they've proven is they're good at running through filters, right? They're not necessarily the best people.
yeah.
So I think that can work in sort of a college to post-college hop. I'm not sure it works 2 to 3 hops down the road. And some of the best people, don't come from schools that you've necessarily heard of, or there are schools that get arbitraged, like Georgia Tech, or University of Waterloo, or Urbana-Champaign, which was unknown for a long time. There's some really great schools out there that don't necessarily have the cachet. Frankly, there's some great people from Harvard, like Zuck and Bill Gates and so on, but man, like the ratio of what they think of themselves and what they can actually do, you gotta think about that too. It's like the joke, like, how do you know someone went to Harvard Business School?
I told you.
Yeah, exactly, they'll tell you.
It's funny and
MIT.
true. And do you think investors in general can see through that BS? Can they see
I think
through?
the good ones can. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
the good ones can.
Speaking of Facebook, some of your top investors on AngelList are actually Google alumni and came out of that big boom. What effect do you think the Facebook IPO is going to have on AngelList and the investing community in general?
I think there will definitely be a lot of new small angel investors in the community. They're mostly going to invest in ex-Facebook companies, like companies started by people coming out of Facebook. Because that's what they know and trust. That's the alumni network they've built. I don't think it'll have a real impact on the entire landscape like people think it will. The majority of money, in angel investing actually comes from professional, institutional, or very regular investors. So seed funds, super angels. One VC fund deciding to launch an angel investment program will toss in 20-25 million bucks a year, which is like the equivalent of what like 50 angels would do by themselves. So I don't think it actually moves the larger needle that much.
What you have invested in the past? You said earlier you're not investing a lot now, but you've invested in the past with like SB Angel a lot, or you have some kind of there's some traditional, Silicon Valley, well-known Silicon Valley angels. You don't do every investment with them, but you've done a fair amount, right?
So I don't really have any regular partners. I mean, there's sort of the regular mafia that shows up a lot.
Sure.
Any hot deal, it's sort of like the vultures or the hyenas or whatever. Sorry, you're right. Better analogy, cookies. And I'm definitely part of that pack. So there are times when you hear about some great deal and everyone's investing, and you kind of what's going on here, right? And the reason is because in these private markets, there's so little information. Everything is so opaque. So each new investor who comes in actually brings some information to the table. Like this guy might know about how the product's doing. That person might have done this on the team. This one might know a lot about
this guy overheard something at Starbucks.
This guy overheard something at Starbucks, right? And so they're all bringing new information in, but in a total miracle of inefficiency, the price does not move as more investors come in. It stays static within the round. Whereas in the public market, Warren Buffett goes in, he buys a stock and announces it. Well, it's already reflected in the stock price. You can't take advantage of it. So because of that, investors do tend to herd together. So there's like a small group of super angels, the True Ventures, First Round Capital, Harrison Metal, Felicis, SV Angel that we tend to show up a lot with, but there's no set formula. There's a lot of companies I've done on my own, and those guys will never have heard of it, and there are a lot of companies that they'll do that I will never hear about or be involved in.
How many people in the room are building a mobile startup? for startups. Really? Wow. And how many are doing a web-based one? Wow. Is that concerning to you, or is that normal?
Yeah, it's a little weird. I mean, it always depends on the exact specifics, but these days, if it can be done on either mobile or web, you should probably do it on mobile. If it can only be done on the web, then it makes sense to do it on the web, because there's certain form factors and certain kinds of things for which it doesn't make sense to do it on the web. But we're rapidly moving to the point where the web is heavily saturated, staked out, and claimed, not in everything. But mobile is total greenfield, and the number of people using mobile is not great. The number of people using this desktop web, and that's just, that trend line is going to continue. And then the companies that capture mobile users monetize much better than companies that capture web users because of that sort of built-in one-click checkout experience that you get on mobile.
What's more important, do you think, building a mobile app or building a mobile-enabled site?
I mean, it completely depends on what you're doing. If you're doing something that you're still fiddling with a product a lot, and you want to be cross-platform, and then it probably makes sense to more have a mobile site. But if you've locked it down, you're going for smoothness of experience, if it's an intense application that requires activating the phone sensors, then you almost definitely have to go with the native app.
We talked about this a year ago, and I wanted to ask the question again and see how much it's changed. But when you came and met with us in March last year, you said that unless a website is growing by tens of thousands of users month over month, then it's probably not growing fast enough to either warrant VC or to just, to see, oh, we've really got something. What is that metric now in your mind of how many users do you have to be growing to say, wow, this has really caught fire on both mobile and the web?
Yeah, there's no hard formulas. It really does depend on the exact application. Some of the mobile growth rates for some companies now are astounding. We've had companies that raise money that came in, like all 12 apps and Urban Sitter and so on. And these are scanned, mobile apps, and when they show up to raise their seed round, they already have 1 million or 2 million downloads. There's a lot to be said for being in the right place at the right time, right, and executing well. So being there when the platform launches. That said, I think any app that's got 100,000 plus installs that's growing will get a serious look. Or even an app with 0 installs that is extremely unique, technically unique, or conceptually unique, and has a great team backing it, will get a real look. On the web, I think the numbers have been relatively static. The web is starting to take on a little bit of the feel that desktop software took on in the early 2000s, right? Where someone came to you and said, yeah, I'm running a Windows app, and be like, does it have to be a Windows app, right? So you kind of think now the same way about mobile versus web.
But have there been a lot of ways to monetize mobile? I mean, have you seen monetization strategies materializing in mobile, or is it?
Yeah, mobile monetizes much better than the web because people can just click pay, click buy, and 99 cents here, $1 there. There are entire categories of things that do not monetize at all on the web, and their mobile versions monetize heavily. A clear example is Instapaper, right? Instapaper. I forget the guy's name, Marco, I think, he's in Italy, who started it. He came to Angel this early on. This was pre-mobile, and he basically said, will investors invest in this? And I was like, numbers are good, but you're in Italy, and it's a news thing, and nobody pays for news. And he said, yeah, you're right, I'll just write as my own little thing. Mobile comes along, he launches these beautiful mobile apps, you can charge for them. They do fundamentally the same thing, but not because your mobile uses them a lot more. He's making very good money.
Does anyone have any questions they want to ask Naval? And please, I just would give one request that you make something that's not so specific to you, but kind of can be enjoyed generally. Let's go Peter, and then right behind you.
Okay.
And I'll repeat it.
I want you to ask this question because I don't have the balls to ask it. and that is, why didn't you invest in, or why did you pass on Uber, and why did you pass on Pinterest?
Why did you pass on Uber specifically?
Well, Uber came to me right at the beginning, and the founders of the company were actually not operational with the company at that point in time. So I was kind of trying to talk them out of that situation, and eventually one of the founders did end up being the CEO. But in between that gap period, I was the one delivering the bad news that you can't start a company and then not run it. Right? Then the first thing you do is.
And Travis was like an investor, right? He was like.
Right.
Yeah, he was
but now
kind of advising them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. So and both the founders were in that situation. So now one of the founders runs the company. So that sort of had to be fixed. But it was definitely a great concept with great people involved, but it was just kind of their commitment was an issue. And then once they sort of committed, you know, when I saw it again that way, they came on Angel List, and we actually introduced them to many people, including First Round Capital. There's a whole round. At that point, you know, we just put a little bit in. Actually, we were experimenting with some investing back then. Pinterest, frankly, I just didn't get it. I mean, like, I heard great things about Ben. He came very well recommended by good friends of mine who are very smart. And I was super busy. Like, AngelList is my own startup. It was taking off. I'm looking at tons of it. So, you know, this thing lands. It's like, yeah, it's doing well, growth, images, I don't get it. Okay, cool, great. Maybe another release tomorrow. Off you go. Right. So this stupidity.
Yeah, I appreciate you talking about that, because I mean, I've talked to VCs and asked, said, oh, you know, they say, oh, Pinterest pitched us, or that. Well, why didn't you invest in it? Oh, well, you know, we can't talk about, you know, the inner workings of us and stuff. It's like, come on, you know, I mean, everybody's got wins and everybody's got losses, and you know, everyone here benefits from hearing that story.
And we have a very specific philosophy in AngelList that it's way more important that every startup have a great experience, rather than, you know, we get an investment or anything like that. So I actually have to bend over backwards. It's rare for me to invest in an English startup because I never want them to feel like I'm imposing or anything like that. And so, especially, you know, in that case, we had so much going on. There's Pinterest, and it's just like, you know, I'm not going to drag the entrepreneur in for a big meeting for a small investment. Off it went.
Right here and then.
But tell Ben that if he got value out of AngelList, he's always welcome to set
to come back to
put
set a little aside for you.
A little tip jar. You know?
Thank you very much for your insight. It's excellent. For founders who are interested in doing lifestyle and consumer-facing products and looking to use, you know, mobile app or mobile devices and web devices as a way to do marketing and branding and such, but are looking for funding to, you know, to build out their plans. It sounds like Silicon Valley typically is not a great choice, but what are other choices as
Yeah,
you know,
Is in locations?
well, I mean, you know, you have AngelList that sounds very clearly designed to go towards tech ideas specifically.
There are a couple of yeah.
Viewers here.
It was a long question, but yeah, if you can summarize it. I think I understood what you're talking about, but maybe I got it wrong.
I could do it again if you like.
But so, what are the alternatives outside of AngelList for companies that maybe don't traditionally fit perfectly into that model?
Yeah, so there's a couple of hundred vendors on AngelList who will fund cash flow businesses.
Okay.
But generally the bar for cash flow businesses is a little higher. They have to be generating cash. And so you have to clearly execute it into whatever you're doing, and now you're looking to scale. That said, it is a much smaller set, and so our bar for distributing those companies is quite a bit higher. The second place you can go is you can always, you know, look towards a Kickstarter if you can pre-sell the product if you're maybe too early to generate that cash flow. But the reality is that a lot of these cash flow / lifestyle, and lifestyle is almost derogatory, so I'm not using that term, but call it these cash flow businesses. The trade-off with taking money or not is just speed of growth, right? And that's often, if you don't find funding, it's not the worst thing. And it's so hard to find funding sometimes, and so hard to convince investors, especially if you're not a standard deal, that I wonder if you really should even be trying to raise money, or rather just focusing on the business and doing customer financing. I had a company like this coming the other day. He's already got 2 customers willing to pay him pretty significant amounts. Instead, he's spending all his time looking for angel financing, beating his head against the wall. I said, you know, just get your customers to pay you and grow out of that. Or one of his customers wants to fund him, like just get him to prepay, right? So those are probably better uses for your effort. That said, if you're generating cash, you're a real business, you're growing, but it's just, you know, you're going to top out at some point. The investors are out there. They are on AngelList. Generally, you look for the people who have not raised a fund of any kind, who are investing their own money, and might have an affinity towards that market that you're in.
If you were starting all over again and you could feasibly bootstrap a business with an amazing team and your friends and whoever, versus going out and raising $1 million, which would you do?
I'd still raise the $1 million. I mean, I hate investors as much as the next guy. Frankly, I've had some really negative experiences with them over the years, and I'm probably in the camp where I find it hilarious that a lot of investors manage to brand money, myself included. Like, it's just money, you know, as long as the Federal Reserve can stamp on it, and who do you care where you get it from? The problem is that historically, money came bundled with control and advice. and control was the worst. So what smart money used to mean as opposed to dumb money is just someone who wasn't going to screw you over. And now it's supposed to be like it's supposed to be the best advisors. The reality is you can unbundle that. You can get your advice from the best advisors, which is why Y Combinator and Techstars and 500 Startups and all those exist. And you can get your money from Pure Money, and you can get your who wants control, just leave it. That said, if you haven't taken in money from investors, the problem is you don't run a rational business. And what I mean by that is you have no checks and balances, there's no board to hold you accountable. The employees, you can't recruit a certain level of employee. You can't recruit anyone really smart if you don't have funding easily. Because what's going to happen is they're going to say, well, what am I getting? Oh, I'm getting equity. Well, if you're a minority common stock shareholder in a company that has no preferred stock, has no real board, the founder can roll out of bed the next morning and dilute you to nothing. They can issue themselves a trillion shares, right? So there needs to be checks and balances in the corporate structure that get built in when the company is financing.
Do you think these three, or even maybe not these three specific companies, but in general, like these three companies that you have, that you're part of, one sold to LinkedIn, one to another company, the other to Groupon, do you think have those companies taken money from some guys in Iowa at a similar valuation? Would they be selling their companies this month, or did the specific investors play roles in setting those deals up, making introductions, or?
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think they would tell you they got value out of their investors' feedback, advice, and so on, but I think in the actual transactions and the execution, those are all self-made. I mean, the entrepreneurs do the work. They're the people in the trenches. So you definitely want to be around smart people. You don't want to be around idiots. What I'm saying is, don't overvalue brand, right? They're just like you yourself are probably a great unbranded entrepreneur. There are great unbranded investors, right? You have to evaluate them, of course, yourself. You have to do some diligence. You have to spend time with them. But you know, today's genius investor, FirstMark Capital was the big one in Pinterest early on. Who here had heard of FirstMark before I mentioned it? Yeah, exactly, one person. Lightbank was the big one in Groupon. Before Groupon, they were not known. So investors' brands get built by the company brands, not the other way around. Investors don't create companies. Companies create investors.
Okay.
Well,
In the center.
Naval, presumably Facebook represents the last transitional shift. Do you think the next one sits among us now in the marketplace?
It's the next.
If you're in this room, then
Startup
come see me
Messiah
out.
here.
Not
Among
tonight,
us.
not
There.
tonight, in the marketplace.
It does, and I don't know what it is. The beauty of the market is that it is accelerating. The rate of change itself is accelerating. Part of the reason why I decided to get into angel investing was I just saw that the rate at which new great companies were being built was faster and faster. And back then, I went back and looked at my old slide deck a year ago, and like the data points I was using was like, here's how Evite grew, here's how MySpace grew, here's how Friendster grew, right? You guys are laughing because like, who are those, right? And so I was like, I don't know who's next, but someone's gonna be next, and they're gonna grow even faster. And so then along came YouTube, and along came Facebook, and so on and so forth, and Twitter. Now even those guys look like they're growing slowly compared to the Pinterests and some of the iOS apps. They get out there and go from 0 to 10 million installs in a year.
Yeah, Sam.
Yeah. I just wanted to ask a question about feedback for investors. One of the things that Angels does very well is to get people in front of people who potentially invest, and obviously there's some pre-qualification of that. What's the opportunity or scope for feedback to the investee companies as to why a particular angel perhaps, or on mass why angel said no, this isn't for us, which might be purely subjective, but may also be a valid reason they can take and work on in their business.
Can you repeat that? So what is the feedback loop for angels that actually pass on investments that they get introduced on through AngelList?
In AngelList. So, I mean, AngelList, depending on the investor's preferences, they might get between 3 companies a week to 15 or 20 companies a week. And they're getting them in these emails. They just hit delete if they're not interested. So they're not going to give you a lot of feedback. And we are sort of almost legally prohibited from giving you actionable advice on how to go raise money because we're doing the introducing for you, and so that gets us into weird regulatory issues. So AngelList is not the place where you're going to get feedback today, but we're changing that. So we're going to be adding sort of one-click buttons and links and little feedback things for investors. And we'll see if they use them, but it could be stuff like, tell me more about this, or, like, tell me, you're missing a team member or something. We're gonna try and do stuff there. The reality is it's really hard to get good actual feedback from investors. Because the number one reason why investors pass on the company is because of the team. And they're not gonna tell you that to your face. So that one's the hardest one. And so that's where you have to be objective. You have to go to the smartest entrepreneur friends that you know and, say like, it's my friend, what do you think of this guy? Right, that's a really hard thing to do. So that's the hardest thing. Then if you go to investor, they pass. Investors are really good at coming up with coded excuses. And so you can get their list of excuses, but then you got to go to someone who's got to decode them for you. So because again, they don't want to look like fools for passing. So I think it's actually really hard to get feedback from investors. I think that's where advisors are really good. In fact, this is one of the key functions that incubators serve. The incubator, their job is at the end, they have to shove you down the pole demo day and get you funded. Otherwise, you're failed as far as they're concerned. So they've got a short amount of time to act, and you're really paying them a lot of equity for advice. So they're going to give you critical, unvarnished feedback. So I think that's actually a great spot to get it.
Yeah.
So I've worked mostly with B2B startups, and my own startup is B2B. And I find a lot of the general sort of startup advice that's out there and the case studies are really B2C focused. So I would love to hear some of your recommendations for some of the best and brightest B2B startup minds and sort of luminaries.
Who are some of the top
Listen to.
B2B startup entrepreneurs, investors?
There are people who have started B2B companies themselves that have then gone on to do investing advising. There's a whole, you can go on AngelList and you can search by, you can narrow them by enterprise, software, and SaaS and all that stuff. So I won't waste your time on that. But one way to think about it, B2B startups just inherently need a lot more cash to get off the ground because there are exceptions, but normally they have a more expensive sales model. They have a longer customer adoption cycle. And so because of that, they almost have to start at the VC circuit. It's very hard to make the kind of progress you need to an angel round, or at least a small angel round. So because that bar is so high, now all of a sudden you have no product, you have no customers, and you're going out and asking for a $3 or $5 million check, all you have to go on is a team. So the bar for a B2B startup is really the team, and the experience of the team there really matters. Whereas you don't really care as much about experience on the consumer side. Consumer side, you're throwing a lot of darts, right? It's more like you're picking the next big rock group. Good luck. On the B2B side, it's a little more rational, which is someone who's pedigreed and has pulled off a great sales or development organization inside a larger company, can then go and raise a bit of money and then go up to the B2B side. So it is still much more of the old school venture advice. I think if you went and you looked up all the talks and the notes and the books from like 5 or 10 years ago, and then you kind of merge them with the current consumer ones, that would be about right.
In the B2B space, you have to sort of do that merging yourself.
You do, yeah. It's catching up, and
you're in the gap, sort of.
I think a few of the B2B investors have discovered this thing called blogging. So you can find them blogging here and there now. In fact, Mike Maples, for example, who's a really bright guy, he actually cut his teeth on consumer investing. He's the co-investor with me in Twitter. But he originally started out doing a B2B company himself out of Austin. A lot of these B2B investors are out of Austin. And so he actually now writes a blog entirely on the future of B2B and investing around it. I think it's called Hyper something, I forget the full name, but you can get a lot of good insights from there.
Let's do one or two more. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah.
Can you tell me like how did you get 25,000 startups on AngelList? So what was the first beginning since like my startup is also focusing on gathering startups and helping.
Hey, Facebook ad. No. How did you get?
I think a competitor just asked me like, how are you? Can you give me some advice?
What are some techniques that you've seen startups use to acquire users? Maybe AngelList.
We have an API. You're welcome to use it.
Did you actually leverage your previous network to get those startups?
I mean, I think we tried everything, right? And the timing was good. The market was right. I knew a lot of the right people. Of course, I hand dragged in a lot of the original companies myself. But after a certain point, it just took off on its own.
Okay, let's do one more right here.
Imagine now you've got more money you have know what to do with. what would you really like to do with your life and your time? Now that you've had all these successes, what would really make you?
So I'm Silicon Valley middle class, believe it or not. Right? A lot of my companies have been exited. I've lost a lot of my investments too. So definitely not at that stage yet.
That's your
Although
question,
I'm confident I'll get there. But the reality is, 10 years from now, I'd like to be working on AngelList.
And AngelList is something that you've worked on. You've worked on some form of AngelList over the course of the last 4 or 5 years, right? It wasn't called AngelList, but
That's
there were
right.
different forms of it.
Yeah,
It's an idea you're very passionate about, and you've been working on for a long time.
Yeah, I mean, I was starting companies back in 1999, and I was advising and investing in companies back in 2001, 2003. And I became the go-to guy when the community was smaller for advice on how to raise money and how to deal with VCs, because back then it was a lot more black box and there wasn't things like Series C and VC bloggers and so on. And so just over time, it sort of just became something I knew a lot about from both sides. And so in some sense or another, I've always been passionate about making this market more efficient and making it more transparent. So yeah, it's been an ongoing thing, and it just consumes you after a while.
We give okay, let's do one more right here, and then we'll shut it. We'll have Naval go.
Hi.
Are you on time? Are you all right? Naval? Okay.
You founded Opinions, which was very hot in '99, and which has been very important to me personally. It could have been the next. It could have been Facebook. That's what I think.
It could have been Facebook. Could have been Yelp. Could have been a lot of things.
Well, yeah, it's still out there, but it's not Yelp. It's not Facebook.
It's owned by eBay, so you can guess what happens there.
Okay. Well, I was going to say, with retrospect, what could have been done differently to get it there?
A lot of things. The biggest one is always timing. When you show up matters almost more than what you show up with. I think the biggest mistake, Opinions is where I made all my original mistakes, because that's when I was just starting out. So I teamed up with the wrong people, we went about building the product the wrong way, we raised too much money, we hyped it up too much, we viewed it as too much of a short-term thing, I didn't stick with it, made kind of all the classic mistakes. And now I'm sort of making neo-classical mistakes, all the classic mistakes. Even then, I think just the timing was so early that not enough people were on the web, social networks didn't properly exist. There's a certain critical mass of people who have to be on the web before social networks can even work. So I don't think it could have been any of these companies today, although I like to think that if we stuck with it, it could have been the Yelp of its day. I mean, it was, but it could have continued onwards in that regard. We actually tried, for example, with the Opinions, we tried to go into local in a big way. There were no local databases. There wasn't enough critical mass on the internet that the average restaurant would even end up with a review. There was no way to virally spread anything, right? We tried to do a lot of social networking. We had a web of trust concept, people following people, trusting people, and all that. But again, it was because your average friend, you might be on the web, but your average friend wasn't, and everyone was dialing up. Just the odds of you being able to get a local network going was too hard. More likely, you just connect to some stranger you've never met. Which is not what Facebook and LinkedIn are all about. So timing does matter. Some things are definitely too early.
We give Naval a big round of applause. All right, oh, that's the only standing O we've ever had. But I haven't made everyone do it. So
I think you've got them trained at this point.
Naval, stay for just one more minute. We have something really special. There's this company that I found just at a party the other night, and I was talking to Ari, and they just Ari and his co-founder built this guitar that has this amp. He can explain it, but I can't. But they built this self-contained guitar that has everything inside. It's got cables. It's wireless. It's got the amp built into it. It's just really, really cool. I've never seen anything like it. And so these guys were kind enough to do our kind of intro music before the event. If you guys heard them jamming out, which we usually have some lame Spotify playlist playing. So we really appreciate that. But actually, they've written a song about AngelList. We're gonna play it. Yeah. So we should get a chair where you can sit in front of it and watch it. But maybe just stand over here and
I was admiring
let
that
it
earlier.
Lie on the couch.
Hi, so like Derek said, I'm Ari, this is Andrew, we're from Unplugged Instruments, thanks for having us here. I'm probably gonna have to cheat a little bit because we just did this afternoon, but that's what iPhones are for. Yeah, so while Andrew's setting up, I guess I can tell you kind of what we're doing. Pretty much we're both amateur guitar players, and it was really hard for us to play our instruments because there's all this gear associated with it, and we're moving so fast nowadays that we decided to try to find an easier solution. So we came up with this guitar, and then we decided, wow, let's do even more than that. Let's let it plug into your phone, and you know, this phone right here has more technology than a 1990 recording studio. So I can add in any effect I want, I can record, I can loop and play back on myself, I can post that up online to network it with my friends, I can learn new songs, I can play over other songs, I can write APIs that all of you can write new apps for and create your own ideas. I got a really good idea earlier about live streaming from somebody here. You know, so we're going to try to think of everything, but invariably we will not. And then if we have APIs out there, everybody else can write the rest. So we're pretty much trying to create a guitar that's a platform and let people be able to create whatever music they want anytime, anywhere, without limits. You all set?
Yep, good to go.
All right, here we go. Under Rule 501 of Regulation D. If I had $1 million, the next Twitter, maybe the next Foursquare. $1 million. If I had $1 million, I'd find the next startup. That's a little bit. Keep going. If I had $1 million, I'd rent you an office in Soma. If I had $1 million, you can move here from Oklahoma. If I had $1 million, maybe we could put a little tiny fridge in there. We could just go there and hack, and we could eat food out of the fridge. If I had $1 million, I'd buy new MacBook Pros and 42-inch monitors. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, I'd buy new air-on chairs and matching Herman Miller cubicles. If I had $1 million, if I had $1 million, I'd buy you hoodies and bro tanks and maybe even a ping pong table. And I'd fund your startup. If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to walk to the store. If I had $1 million, we'd take Uber, cause it costs more. If I had $1 million, we wouldn't have to eat ramen noodles, but we'd still eat ramen noodles. We'd just eat more of them. If I had $1 million, I could finally get a meeting with Naval. He'd finally return my call. If I had $1 million, I'd fund your startup. Feel free to join along. If I had $1 million, 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 I'd be rich.
I just got a return email from that. So,
Honestly, like you guys, you know, if you want to record that properly, I'm happy to blast it to every investor in the valley. That's pretty awesome.
Charlie?
I love what you built.
We got our social media intern back.
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, we'll get him. So, Naval has to take off, but he has some of our events before, and if you haven't seen it, this is going to sound strange, but I will send this in an email. But Naval, like many of our past presenters, has agreed to do what we call VIP meeting contests. So start founders can go, and we have a page you can pitch, and you can get friends and whoever else people are sharp to vote for it. And he's agreed to meet with whoever wins that contest. So, and will you read the other?
Yeah, I will.
Read the other ones.
I will, and these guys are disqualified because
They're not.
They already won. Cheating.
So let's give Naval a big round of
Thank you.
applause.